AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hello, guys. Welcome to the what is the post-Independence Day podcast, but the pre. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Just bear with me. Just bear with me. It is the true post-Independence Day, but pre-celebration day of Independence Day. We actually declared our independence on July 2nd, 1776. That was the day that the founders and the framers declared independence from England. However, it took almost 48 hours for them to ratify and edit the document that was our Constitution, and it became official on the 4th, but the independence was declared on the 2nd. This is just a higher education show, I guess. That's all you just attribute that to Yavapai Junior College and all the things it taught me. Welcome, guys. A great show today. We got, first and foremost, will be Reagan biographer Craig Shirley. You can follow him at Twitter at Craig SB as in boy, P-A. He is an author. He is a historian. He's written about 4 billion books: Reagan's Revolution, Rendezvous with Destiny, December 1941, The Last Act, Reagan Rising, Citizen Newt. Some of the most influential people in the history of this country, modern-day influential people. Yesterday, you guys, if you're listening in sequence, yesterday you heard on the podcast talking about some of the sound bites talking about the left's continued march down the road of lunacy and their desire to abolish ICE. The left turning its back once again on law enforcement. And then, as is the case, cooler heads prevail and people begin to respond after thinking rationally for a few minutes. I want you to listen to Pat Buchanan. He was talking in response to the idiocy of the left and their desire for the abolition of ICE. Listen up.
Take a look at the Washington Post today. They got a quote by Barack Obama, who says they're tearing their hair out. Take it easy, you guys. Mm-hmm. Look, they had a very bad week, Raymond. The Democrats did. The so-called Muslim ban was upheld. Public employee unions can't extort fees from workers. They have to win them over. You got the opening on the Supreme Court. You've got all of these things taking place, and now you've got a real panic, and there's talk in the Democratic Party now they want to abolish ICE.
We've been talking about that all morning. It's unbelievable.
Which means that, if the Border Patrol doesn't get them, doesn't capture them, I don't care if it's MS-13, they're here. Nobody can go after them. It's an act of insanity. And it's amazing the language they're using. They feel, Trump had a bad week, they felt, when you had the families divided down on the border, and all of a sudden he's had these succession of victories, and there's real panic in the Democratic Party, and you saw it with Bill Maher and with Michael Moore. So I think what's going to happen, is Trump had a very good week.
Yeah. What is the impact, Pat, of this 28-year-old socialist who really knocked Joe Crowley, who was a member of the Democratic leadership, out of his seat in Queens? What does this portend? The New York Times had that piece this weekend, the coming millennial socialists, where they see this wave of socialist young candidates for office. Is that a possibility? Is that the direction of things?
Here's the thing and she said so. She said so yesterday on TV. What's it, Ocasio-Lopez?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, in her district, there was a 13% turnout, And Crowley, it's only a 18% white district now. It used to be about 58% when Crowley was elected, but they've given him the North Bronx or the South Bronx, as well as Queens. And these are very much occupied by third world immigrant folks. And they overwhelmed Crowley, and Crowley had no organization. Obviously, as everything's atrophied up there. But exactly, she is going to pull the party to the left. She pulled Crowley. He denounced ICE. Here's basically a Tip O'Neill Democrat denounced ICE as fascist. You've got the other night Miss Nixon up there, who's running against the governor of New York. What did she call it? A terrorist organization. You're talking about Americans who are protecting the United States from MS-13, who are rounding up illegal immigrants who are beating their wives and driving drunk and killing people. They do all this dangerous and tough work to protect the country from people who have broken the law, broke into the country, and are committing crimes, and they're denouncing them as though they were brown shirts.
I want to give you guys, and most of you already understand history to the degree you're supposed to, but when we talk about the brown shirts, there was the SS and the SA, and they were, Ernst Röhm and Adolf Hitler were vying for power in Germany. And the brown shirts were a very inner circle group of hardcore Nazis that did Hitler's bidding for him, did the Nazi party's bidding for him. They were, when you look at the Night of the Long Knives, which was Kristallnacht, which was the night that Germany rose up and began to eliminate Jews, the brown shirts were behind all of that. They were a violent terrorist. Well, you know what? Look at them as an MS-13 full of legal American citizens. That's who they were. The brown shirts were as repulsive of human beings as they could. They're comparing our law enforcement to Nazi brown shirts, and that just shows you the length and depth of the ignorance in history that they have. That's an initial response to the ICE abolition of ICE, which the left is calling for. And he's right. You get rid of ICE, there's nobody at the border to protect you and I, our kids or their families from anybody. And then you have Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She was on Fox and Friends this morning. Listen up to what is becoming the overriding Democratic message. It is not a message. It is just a call to action, physical violence, and all things go. But listen to what she says about the Democrats' message. It is being isolated down to a very narrow, singular thing. Listen up.
There are so many Democrats who've made it pretty clear they're not going to vote for anybody the president nominates.
Look, I think that's the Democrats' message right now, which is oppose everything and do nothing. It's frankly gotten really sad that their party has no message, no leadership, no solutions, and they want to fight a president who's trying to lead and who's doing amazing things for our country and things that are really hard to argue with. We have a booming economy. He's created job after job after job. ISIS is on the run one day after the next. Great things are happening across the globe, and particularly in America, and this president is leading that effort. And Democrats, frankly, they should join him in all of the great things that are happening in this country instead of fighting them, particularly since they have no ideas of their own.
Sarah, quickly on that Supreme Court pick, can you confirm that he's only interviewing people that were on that list? Because there's been rumors of adding a couple of additional names.
The president has said he's focused on that list, and as of right now, he's going to continue to stick with that list. Look, the main thing the president is looking for are people that fit the qualifications that you would want in a Supreme Court justice. Tremendous intellect, someone who will stick to upholding the Constitution, and somebody who has great judicial temperament. Those are the big things the president is looking for in a candidate, and he's got a great group to choose from, and I know he's going to make the right decision, and we're excited about his announcement on Monday.
Let's be clear, guys. There's no doubt in my mind, and Susan Collins from Maine would have you believe, she was on the other day talking about she had met with President Trump. He had called some senators and congressmen and women in to get their input, and she had said that she was hoping he would expand his list. I think that was where the rumor came from, that she said that he was possibly interviewing people outside the list. But listen to her daily press briefing on yesterday, as she talks about what the president will potentially stress, and I think what his values are as he looks to pick, which is exactly how this works. When you're the sitting president and you get to appoint a justice, you get to do so based on what you prefer to have in your justices. And it I would always argue that the argument should never be about what the justice is going to do, because the justice should always be doing what's in the best interest of the Constitution. So listen to her. This is her yesterday at the press briefing.
During the campaign, the president said, I am pro-life and I will be appointing pro-life judges. Is the president still committed to appointing pro-life judges?
As the president said last week, he's not going to talk to judges about specific cases. He's looking for individuals that have the right intellect, the right temperament, and that will uphold the Constitution.
Senator Susan Collins says that she wants a nominee that will respect precedent and that Roe versus Wade is settled law. Does the president agree that Roe versus Wade is settled law?
Again, the president's not going to get into asking the candidates about specific cases, but he's looking for somebody that meets those qualifications that I just outlined.
And the president is pro-life. He won't ask them about cases. And let's be very clear about this from the left's perspective, okay? This has nothing to do with anybody's rights other than abortion rights, period. This is all about the need and the desire to have an abortion when you want, where you want, and how you want, it's not a pro-choice platform. It's a pro-abortion platform. And just to show you how unhinged they are, Will and Grace star Deborah Messing recorded an iPhone. Listen to her as she hears about Justice Kennedy's announcement. I want you to listen to. She basically sounds like one of the actors from Blair Witch Project whose life's about to be taken from them. Listen to her. Listen to her message.
Okay, you guys. The news about the Supreme Court, I was devastated, but now I'm just pissed. And see my shirt? Badass feminist. We are going to fight.
What are you going to do, Deborah? There's nothing you can do, okay? There's nothing you can legally do to stop the president from appointing who he wants to be the next Supreme Court justice. Your boy Harry Reid saw to that. The nuclear option was available to justices below the Supreme Court level up through the term until Harry Reid decided he was going to change policy. Now the nuclear option, the simple 51-vote majority, is available to the Republicans in this case. And here's the thing. The Democrats are already saying they're going to vote against the appointee. It doesn't matter who it is. They don't even know who it is. But that's not going to matter as long as we have 51 votes. And then from the president himself, listen to – and here's the thing, guys, that we probably should go on recognizing President Trump does not take a minute off. I don't care if he's golfing. I don't care if he's at Mar-a-Lago. I don't care if he's on Air Force One. I don't care what he's doing. He's always working. And we've never seen this, and the media can't keep up, and they hate it because every day it's something new. This is a guy who's a problem solver. He's been one his whole life, and the White House has never seen anything like it. But listen, this is President Trump basically telling you what's about to happen.
During the morning, I interviewed and met with 4 potential justices of our great Supreme Court. They are outstanding people. They are really incredible people. In so many different ways, academically and every other way. Very interesting, though, was my 4 meetings. I'll be meeting with 2 or 3 more, and we'll make a decision on the United States Supreme Court, the new justice. That'll be made over the next few days, and we'll be announcing it on Monday, and I look forward to that. I think the person that is chosen will be outstanding.
So actually he erred. He didn't interview 4 justices. He interviewed 4 potential candidates for the open position that when Justice Kennedy retires. He knows what he's doing. He's always known what he's doing. Verbal faux pas or not, you get the idea. You always kind of know what he's saying. And this list will be probably made up of 25 to 30 people that will have impeccable, undeniable credentials as justices to sit on the Supreme Court. The only reason any of them will be voted against by anyone will be because they don't like the political affiliation or the justice's stance on abortion, period. If you listen to liberals, the day after this appointment happens, abortion will be illegal, which no one has ever said. What I believe is going to happen is that eventually a Roe v. Wade case is going to come in front of them, and they're going to do what they should have done in the first – well, they should have not allowed it, but we're past that. They're going to hand the Roe v. Wade choice and decision back to the states. And there will be states like California that will welcome you with open arms and let you abort however, whenever, and whoever you want. And there will be other states where it won't be allowed. You can bet states in the South will ban it. I look at, the genocide of the black community will be at some point ceased and over. Please don't buy the rape victim, mother's health argument, because those are so infinitesimally small pieces of the I've talked with and I've heard interviewed literally hundreds of abortion or obstetricians. I've never heard one say that they had to do a surgery or they had to perform a procedure to save the mother's life at childbirth. All the ones I've ever heard have said they never know anybody. That's a 1 in a million. Okay, and I'll leave that to the doctor's decision-making process at the event. The rape victim one is also an incredibly rare event. I'm not sure how to go about that, and I'm not sure that there's a legal precedent. I don't know. Those are some nebulous gray areas, but the fact of the matter is, Democrats, this justice is about one subject, period, and that is abortion. And anybody that says otherwise is lying. We got a great day lined up. Up next, Craig Shirley, author, historian, and Reagan biographer.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Censorship is a key issue here, particularly for people on the right. Do you think it was addressed adequately?
Definitely not. It was useful to name check Diamond and Silk. It was useful to check even politicians who had campaign ads that were shut down. But in every case, Zuckerberg was allowed to essentially dismiss the case and move on.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Welcome back, guys. I'm pleased to introduce my first guest this morning, Craig Shirley. Craig is an author, a historian. He is a Reagan biographer. He's written books, Reagan's Revolution, Rendezvous with Destiny, December 1941, Last Act, The Final Years, An Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, and Reagan Rising, The Decisive Years. Good morning, Craig. How are you?
Hey, Curt, happy 4th or happy 3rd, verging on happy 4th.
You too. I actually told people at the beginning of the show, this is actually the day after we declared independence, because we declared independence on the 2nd of July. We didn't actually formally, and apparently it took them about 48 hours to amend and fix that Constitution. This is an amazing time in this country's history. I think we are at what can only be called a watershed moment. I was a teenager under the Reagan administration, not a very politically active guy, but I recognized an amazing man. He was, my God, he was perfection. And I think from a moral and ethical standpoint, number one, but number two, the guy could speak. He knew, he had a presence about him. He had all of the things Donald Trump doesn't have when it comes to a public personality. He had charisma. Yes. He was an incredible speaker. He was passionate.
He was a student of history. He was a voracious reader. And somebody once did a study, and they found that Reagan quoted the framers and the founders more than any previous American president. He something like 25% of the speeches quoted, Adams, Jefferson, Washington, Thomas Paine. He believed deeply, which is why at the Reagan Library, the two documents that are engraved on the walls of the Reagan Library are the preamble to the Declaration and the preamble to the Constitution, because they had great meaning to Reagan.
Well, I always felt like, even at that age, and I wasn't political, I always felt like he understood what he was doing was monumental. The job he had carried with it a legacy that he was terrified to tarnish, and in a good way. And that adhering to the Constitution, abiding by the Constitution, upholding the Constitution were all good things.
Yeah,
and we were not 20-some years removed from the civil rights movement then as well.
Don't forget too, Curt, is that Reagan unleashed really the second American Revolution in the 1970s, fully 200 years after the first American Revolution, which was based in the Enlightenment, which said was the individual is more important than the state. Which believed that power flowed from the people to the national government, not the other way around. And over the years, we've gotten away from that to the New Deal and the Great Society and the New Frontier, which made institutional government more important than people and made the government rule over people. And Reagan comes along beginning in the 1970s, says this is not the original intention of the framers or the founders. This is antithetical to what they intended, and I'm going to reassert the truth that Washington serves to exist to serve the American people and not the other way around.
If there's nothing more you can say about President Trump, it is that everything he has done has been for and about the American people.
You're getting the same results with Reagan and with Trump. Now, we're coming to understand that Reagan was a true intellectual.
Right.
And as you know, his letters have come forward, and his writings and speeches, and this is a man who thought very, very deeply about things and was a voracious reader of American history, politics, and sociology, and things like that. Trump is more of an instinctual conservative. I would never say he was an intellectual, but he understands in his fiber, in his being, what is the right and proper role of government versus the American people. So, by the tax cuts, he's taking power away from the government and giving back to the people. I read the other day that they're studying an initiative to shrink and combine federal agencies, which is a form of federalism, which is take power away from the national government, give it back to the states and localities. So he understands, and also this getting the country away from this nonsense of the neocon BS about the nation building, is taking us away from that and getting it back to America's proper role in the world, which is not to be the world's policeman, but rather lead by example rather than by using the military first.
You point out, I think, an important distinction. President Trump is not a politician. He is a pragmatist. He's a problem solver. He is a private sector success because President Trump recognizes you hire people to do jobs. If those people don't do the jobs, you fire them, which is exactly why he's had so much turnover. And people talk about, the instability in the Trump administration. That's not instability. That's him looking for and finding the right people to do the right jobs, instead of the administration of Obama, who had no turnover, and you just accept the job people are doing, whether it's good or not. I mean, that's the difference between Republicans and Democrats.
It is the ultimate expression of the free market. Is that if you're doing your job, you keep your job. If you're not doing your job, you're fired. Socialism keeps people in mediocrity forever. Is that freedom it champions the success and accomplishments of individual. And I'm sorry, but in our society there are winners and losers. And if you're a loser, if you're a bad administrator, if you're a bad secretary, then you get fired, and that's the way it should be.
It's a relevant point in the sense that everything that's happened in the last year and a half, from a legislation perspective, for the most part, has been incredibly beneficial, or is going to be incredibly beneficial to the American people.
Yes.
So I listened to liberals talk about the fact that Justice Kennedy's replacement is going to remove their rights. Apparently, they think we're going back to 1850 or something after Justice Kennedy's appointees.
That's typical liberal blather,
Right. No, but but here's the reason, and we both chuckle at it for the same reason. It's funny, but the fact of the matter, some people are deadly serious about the fact that they believe everything's going to go away. I'm pretty sure that every right you had the day Trump got elected, you still have today. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure as a legal American, right? And so.
Well, actually, if you consider the tax cuts and the additional money you have in your pocket, he's expanded your rights.
That's absolutely valid. But they've made a segment of people believe this, which is the radicals you're seeing protest and violently protest First Amendment, peaceful rallies, and all the other stuff that goes with that. My biggest issue right now is, and I said this before you came on, is much like Reagan, Trump doesn't take a day off. He works 24/7, 365. I don't care if he's on the golf course or he's at Mar-a-Lago. He's getting stuff done. The media can't handle that, number one. And number two, they can't keep up. They can't keep, which is why the headlines are the world's going to end version 3, world's going to end version 4.
Version 4, version 5.
They really, right, no, and they keep doing that over and over again.
The sky is falling, yes.
Right. No, and it's the Chicken Little thing, and there definitely is a boy who cried wolf thing to this, but we're starting to see a movement that I caught onto the other day called Walk Away. And Walk Away is a movement of former liberal Democrats who are walking away from the party because there's a great video out. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a great 5-minute video of a man who was a hardcore liberal Democrat, and basically he gives video and audio reasons about why he left. And it's incredibly powerful because it's based in fact. And it's someone who finally realizes all the things we're trying to tell young progressives. Now, listen, look at your party. Don't listen to what they tell you. Look at what they do. Because what they tell you has nothing, in any way, shape, or form, is not similar to the things that they're actually doing. Abolish ICE. I mean, on what planet is abolishing a law enforcement agency going to make you safer?
We are witnessing in real time the reorganization of the two major parties in America. We've seen this before. The parties have switched side over the years on war and peace and tariffs, taxes. And I remember in 1973, the U.S. economy was in recession. Senator Ted Kennedy and Senator Walter Mondale, both card-carrying liberals, proposed massive tax cuts for the American worker to help the economy jump-started. And President Richard Nixon, the Republican, said, no, that would be irresponsible. We're going to prime the pump with massive federal spending. So things change. Yeah. Republicans used to be more free trade than they are now. They used to be more restrictive under Smoot-Hawley in 1932 than they are now.
Right.
So by Democrats leaving the Democratic Party and coming over to the Republican Party is going to rebalance the two parties. So the Republican Party presumably is going to become more blue-collar, more populist, more skeptical about more socially conservative, more skeptical about nation building, things like that. So it's going to make the Democratic Party more left wing and the Republican Party more populist.
I got to tell you, I watch it, and I've said before, the Republican Party in D.C., the swamp members of the Republican Party, stopped representing me a long time ago. The things that they say and do, they don't represent true conservative values in any way. And I do believe we're in the midst of a seismic shift.
I agree.
And going against the media that is doing everything it can do, legal, illegal, true or false, to prevent it from happening. I mean, my God. The fact that these people that ran the FBI under the Obama administration committed these treasonous crimes and aren't being made to pay for it with jail time or gallows, being hung by the in the gallows, is beyond me.
Lois Lerner is walking the streets. Lois Lerner is walking the streets today, collecting her federal pension. Was never prosecuted for her egregious crimes against conservative groups and abuse of power with the IRS. And so is James Clapper, who lied before Congress about the NSA spying on the private American citizen. Lying before Congress is a felony. It's a federal offense. You go to jail for stuff like that. And he's out there, walking the streets again, also criticizing Trump. So, people see this and they say, look, the system as it is now doesn't work because the elites get away with it.
They do. Well, and Clinton was she not the poster child? I mean, when we watched James Comey stand in front of the world and basically list her treasonous crimes, and then at the end say, well, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute anyway, and we're all kind of standing there with our mouth agape. I mean,
exactly. That was engaged in cover-up, the smashing of cell phones and the deletion of thousands of emails. This is what Nixon was driven from office for, was obstruction of justice. And ironically, she was on the Watergate committee, the House committee that went after Richard Nixon for the very crimes that she herself committed.
Yeah, I mean, this is a woman who to me is the most corrupt, repulsive human being to ever be put before us as a candidate, who was married to a repulsive human being who ran in the White House and did things that were not only unworthy of the office, but unworthy of a real man. And
Kurt, this being the July 3rd, it's important to cite the Federalist Papers, which became the basis for the argument for the Constitution because the Articles of Confederation weren't working. Jay Hamilton and Madison wrote 70-some-odd Federalist Papers, which were published in the local newspapers at the time. And they talked about, in the Federalist Papers, what was important for somebody to be president of the United States. And the two most used words were experience and character. I think they used the word character something like 38 times. And, is that the American people almost always get it right by choosing the person, maybe not of the best, most sterling character, but better than the character of the opponent they're running against. And I would never say that Donald Trump has the character of Mother Teresa. But you know what? I can argue that he had a better character than Hillary Clinton.
And the fact of the matter is, I stopped caring about character when I realized that the rest of Americans didn't care about character with Bill Clinton. I'm not looking for moral guidance from the Oval Office. I'm a man. I'm a Christian. I can handle that stuff
that's right.
My own house.
The president should not be our moral teacher and leader, but they himself should be of good character.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. But the fact of the matter is, right now, I will take achievement over reputation every day of the week. And that's what I'm getting. I'm getting. Yep. Yeah, we're looking at a record low unemployment. for minorities. We're looking at the middle-class American taking more money home. We're looking at safer borders. We're looking at ISIS getting its ass kicked all across the Middle East. We're looking at a lot. We're sitting down at the table, potentially ending the the Korean War legally
right.
and physically.
After 50
sitting
some
at
odd
the
years.
table. Right. No, and having Putin and Trump sit at the same table. I don't think anything. I'm not expecting anything great to come out of that, but certainly I don't see anything bad coming out of that.
We've been talking to the Soviets since Dwight Eisenhower's time when he met with Khrushchev, and Kennedy signed the test ban treaty with Khrushchev, and Nixon met with Brezhnev and signed grain accords and loan payments and things like that. Carter signed SALT too. Reagan met 4 times with Gorbachev. The Soviets, the Russians now, and the United States have been talking for 60 years. So why would Donald Trump be condemned for doing exactly what his predecessors did?
It's the same thing at the border, right? I mean, he didn't implement a new policy. That's the policy that's been under since Bush and Clinton and Obama.
This policy goes back to Eisenhower. That's when we first started having a problem with the border. Was under Dwight Eisenhower.
You can't be a sovereign nation, and you can't be a nation of laws without secure borders. That doesn't work.
That is almost a verbatim quote from Ronald Reagan.
I want to finish up the interview by asking you something that it might catch you off guard. It might be awkward. You may not have an answer. But if you had to point to one thing that Ronald Reagan's legacy that he left us that is still somewhat alive today, that something he left us from a values perspective, a legal perspective, what's the thing that you look back on Reagan and say, thank God he did this because it's led to this? What would be that thing?
That's a great question. I think it would be, he used to say, don't look to me to solve your problems, look to yourself. And in that simple phrase, he communicated the spirit of the Declaration of Independence, which is that America is a do-it-yourself enterprise. Don't look to government to solve your problems. Don't look to Big Brother to solve your problems. Don't look to Washington to solve your problems. Solve your own problems. Create your own society. Create your own wealth and your own. And if you create your own poverty, so be it. But create your own prosperity. Create your own life. Don't look to Big Brother to be the panacea for what's going to solve what ails you. Look to yourself. And I think that still burns inside the Republican Party, and I think it burns inside of Donald Trump, and certainly the conservative movement, yourself and myself, people like that. But that had been extinguished from the time of the New Deal up until Reagan's election. We really had 2 big government parties in America. We had the big government Democrats and the junior varsity big government Republicans, but nobody was making the argument on behalf of the individual. Reagan was the first president since Coolidge, and Coolidge didn't do it all that well because he wasn't the public speaker that Reagan was. But Reagan was the first one really in the 20th century, the modern modern politician who told us to look to ourselves to solve our problems. And that's not always an easy thing to do. Is that this is why the liberal message is emotional and the conservative message is intellectual. The liberal message to the American people is that give me power so I can solve your problems. And you think, oh, that sounds pretty good. Okay, I'll give Washington my money and my rights and all that. And the conservative message is, and Reagan's message is, give me power so I can give it back to you. You have to think about that. He said, oh, I know. He wants to take over the national government, so he wants to reduce the power and authority and scope and realm of the national government and give me back my own personal power. But that's an intellectual discipline.
President Reagan trusted in the ingenuity and the entrepreneurship and the moral character of the American people, Craig.
Absolutely,
I got to run.
Yes.
Listen, God bless you, man. Thank you so much. Happy Independence Day, and hopefully you and I can get back together soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Curt. Happy 4th.
Take care. Craig Shirley, at Craig SBPA on Twitter. We're going to be back with Roundtable, Second Amendment Roundtable.
Hey, folks, I want to tell you about Breitbart News' Second Amendment newsletter, Downrange with AWR Hawkins. Features the top gun stories of the week every week, and guest columnists like Gun Owners of America's Larry Pratt or Armed American Radio's Mark Walters. Also features a review of a firearm or a firearm accessory each week. The newsletter downloads on Thursday, comes right to your email inbox. You can subscribe at Breitbart.com/AWR.
We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Welcome back, guys. Tuesday's Second Amendment Roundtable with Dr. A.W. Hawkins and Mark Walters. Join me today. A.W., good morning.
Good morning, Kurt. Great to be with you.
You there, Mark?
I am. Good to be with you.
A.W., I'm going to point this question to you first. Let me preface this by saying I grew up in Alaska, so my father was a hunter. I get hunting. I totally understand how and why it's a necessity these days. Growing up in Alaska, it was part of everyday life. But there was a picture of a young lady who went on a trophy hunt in Africa. She brought down a black giraffe, and a black giraffe apparently is a giraffe that is rather old. They get black as they get older. I'm an animal lover. I had a hard time with that photo, and obviously you guys know it's creating enormous stir in social media. I'm wondering, when you see that picture, A.W., what's the first thing that kind of crosses your mind?
I'll answer you honestly, but I just think she was a good shot. I mean, I don't have any. I don't feel anything for the animal because I know where the animal was shot. I know how regulated it is, and I'm even going to say over-regulated. But she didn't get to pick that animal. The South African government decides which animal needs to be taken out for the good of the rest of the giraffes. And, so I understand all that, but that's in the background. This animal was an animal that needed to be removed, and it just happened to be an animal that she wanted to take. So everybody was happy, and that's why she expressed such joy. So that's the first thing I see. And I do think about the backlash that was caused when that Cecil the lion was shot in 2015. And as a result of that backlash, there was a lull in lion hunting, and the government, I wrote on it, the government down there said they were going to have to kill 200 lions just to get the population back to a healthy point. They were going to have to kill that many just because hunters weren't showing up anymore because of the public backlash. And that tells you the importance of hunting these animals.
Let me be clear, A.W., and I'm with you. I'm not a big hunter, but I'm not against the rights of the hunter. I get it. This is as humans, we have encroached upon territory and land to the point where we have to regulate populations for their own good. And in Alaska, there was not just for their own good, but it was for the safety of the public with the bears and the wolves and all the things that went with that. And that's part of what I want to get into the conversation. Mark, let me ask you, I don't know how much you've seen of it, but I'm wondering what your first impression was in seeing that photo and kind of hearing the story as it's playing out now.
Well, I'll be brutally honest, just like AWR. I thought, wow, look at that. That's awesome. How much is that going to cost her to get it home, I thought, wow, that's fantastic because look, one of the things that's being overlooked here is the fact that that giraffe produced over 4,000 pounds or 2,000 pounds of meat that will be donated locally. Okay, this thing does not go to waste. This wasn't done just for her thrill and her enjoyment. While it was done for part of that is the thrill of the hunt, there's, as you just heard AWR talk about, there's conservation issues at play, and the giraffe herds are not thinning out because of hunts like this. And as he mentioned, she didn't get to pick that giraffe. The bigger story, I thought it was awesome. I thought, wow, that was great. Would I have loved to have been able to do that and been on that hunt? That would have been an awful lot of fun. However, there's a bigger thing in play here that we're not talking about, and that is the fact that these photographs are used by the left to elicit emotion because people see this beautiful giraffe and they don't have a lot of knowledge about what goes into a hunt like this and how the hunt gets approved and the licensing that goes into place. And as AWR mentioned, how the giraffe or the animals are selected or whatever is set up, how it's done, and how the government, where she is, the local government, sets these hunts up. But they do know that these pictures elicit a lot of emotion and tug at the heartstrings, and they're used against all of us. We've become desensitized. What if she was holding up, a white-tailed deer and it was bleeding out of its nostrils? You're still going to see the same reaction from the bleeding heart left, pun intended, okay? It doesn't matter what it is. AWR mentioned Cecil the lion. That was a perfectly legitimate legal hunt. People didn't like it. They throw that photograph up, and what does it do? The emotions it emits spark the liberal left and trigger the liberal left, and boom, next thing you know, this guy's getting death threats and can't work as a dentist for the next 2 years. It's ridiculous.
And I want to reinforce something that you guys have said. This is a very emotional thing for me, period. I'm an animal lover. Again, I totally understand hunters. I understand how conservation works. I understand how the government works in conservation. I understand that 2,000 pounds of meat went to the locals and fed locals. All of the hunters, true hunters, legitimate hunters, don't hunt for the sport. They hunt for the sport, but the benefits of the hunt, the meat, all of the things that go with it. The local communities over in Africa, many of them thrive on trophy hunting businesses that are dictated and mandated and overseen by groups over there. It's the poachers that need to be put to the gallows. That's where this thing goes off the rails. But see, here's the thing, guys. Both of you and I, we're all on the same page. I just recognize that because I'm morally and ethically opposed to it, I don't deserve to have the government step in. Just because I'm offended, I'm upset. I choose not to do it. I choose not to practice it. I choose not to look at it or support it. That's my right as an American. That's how it's supposed to work. The liberals would have, like you said, the liberals would have the government step in and mandate laws that would then force the government itself to go out and kill these animals because we're not allowing ourselves to regulate the population the way we're supposed to.
Well, and I'm going to make an assumption here. I know that's dangerous, and not about you, Kurt, or your position or anything. You're very clear on that. But I've watched these freaks and hippies on Twitter wish this woman would die, this huntress. They call her amoral. They call her heartless. They call her vile. I've watched and read, and I would guess that 95% of the people saying that have no problem. And this may be a place you don't want to go, but I'm just going to make a point. They have no problem with a doctor reaching into a womb and ripping a baby apart for an abortion. Right. And you're just like, hey. It's just more opportunism by these heathens. And that's, again, why and Mark and I've talked about this, but I've just kind of learned to celebrate these moments because guess what? I'm not going to look at it through the lens of the left. And that's not saying we all have to like hunting, Kurt. That's not saying you don't have a valid position.
No, but
it's just,
but they... they're absolute. They're morally absolute, right? The second you say anything other than, "Oh my God, that's a travesty," you hate animals, and which is not the case. That's not even close to the case. But that's the whole. The only way they can keep the argument is by painting with an incredibly broad brush that isn't even remotely realistic. Again, I have a problem with trophy hunting. Now that's me. If I have enough of a problem with it, I'm going to run for office and fix the laws, or I'm going to start a movement that stops it. That's the beauty of living in this country. You do that stuff in Africa, you're going to jail because the country, many of those towns rely on this for sustenance. And again, I don't have to agree with it, and we don't. So anyway, that took longer than I wanted to, but I just thought that was an interesting example of the hypocrisy of the left, and you're exactly right, A.W. The same people who are pro-animal life and against the death penalty for humans have no problem with the millions and millions and millions of abortions that happen.
Yeah, and Kurt, let me jump in real quick and just one final note on my end regarding this. One descriptive that AWR missed was murderer. They're calling her a murderer. And they wish the same fate upon her. And again, they're using the phrase murder. And the other thing is when you want to talk about how powerful the emotion is, and they know it, look at the emotion it elicited in you. Okay? It brought that emotion out in you, and you're capable of thinking, unlike the left who acts on emotion. Their whole political premise is based on emotion. And that's how powerful that is. Those are powerful pictures.
Those same people calling her a murderer had no problem with the illegal alien that murdered Kate Steinle walking.
Right.
Apparently not. Okay. And they don't have the same problem that AWR just mentioned.
Right. No, it's the hypocrisy. It's just another point that again, it speaks to the volumes to the fact that and I mentioned this. I don't know if you guys saw there was a protest. There was a First Amendment march that was interrupted by Antifa, and in the march, a member of the First Amendment group they were peacefully protesting, knocked out a member of the Antifa. Literally knocked him cold. His friends dragged him off. And I made the remark, if you will go back and look, that one of the things that's not being called out, it's a very minute detail, but I think it's very telling. When you see confrontation and you see First Amendment people defending themselves, they'll defend themselves, they'll knock a guy out, there'll be a fight, and then things will kind of settle down. When you see someone from the left knock someone on the ground, what do you see? You see a mob of people surround them, kick, punch, and right, because it's a different type of anger. This is a self-defense. I have a right to do this. I'm going to defend and knock you out, as opposed to I hate you as an evil human being and I want to kill you. That's a distinct and marked difference in the two groups.
That old boy's arms curled up like a praying mantis.
Oh, my God.
That's the difference between offense and defense is what you just described, obviously.
And the fact that we're
defend ourselves when we're attacked. It's the left that likes to put the attack out because they've lost the argument.
Right. I keep saying it. That is, I think, a very small look into the future in the sense that I really honestly believe the left is picking a fight with a group of people they really don't want to fight with. I'm not saying that is a good thing. That's not a good thing. Anyway, buried beneath all of the news that Trump is winning in North Korea and Russian meetings and economy and taxes and all the other stuff, us three have talked about for about a year and a half now the Second Amendment, how it was going to be happy days are here again once Trump won. That quickly died a death that no one saw coming, and when it did, AW, you've been writing about it. Mark, you've been talking about it on Armed American Radio Daily. I want to ask you guys, and I'll start with you, Mark. I want to ask you, what do you think, when do you think our Second Amendment becomes top of the fold news again, and why?
Litigation. We need to win some victories that put us in the press that shuts the left up entirely. And by that, I think we have one coming, by the way. I'll tease that. I can't say what it is yet, but I can tell you that Alan Gottlieb on Armed American Radio just this past weekend on the show that you were on, Kurt, made mention to my audience that he had news coming shortly about a court victory, and I'll leave it at that as far as that victory is concerned. But we need litigation on our side that shows America that us, and let's face it, it's disheartening when all you see is Parkland kids on the news, split screens, illegal immigration marches. You would think the left was winning if you just parachuted in here. You wouldn't know there was a conservative voice in America at all, let alone that conservative voice is winning. That's why Donald Trump is president. That's why the economy is doing what it's doing, and that's why the left is going nuts, is because we're winning. But when that's all you see, it's disheartening. So we need some of those victories, like we just saw with immigration and so forth, and the Muslim countries that ban, travel ban and so forth. We need some of those related to Second Amendment cases, and I want to assure your audience that they are coming.
AW?
I agree with everything Mark said. I want to say that first. And then secondly, I would say on July 9th, we're going to see this focus because that's when Trump puts forth his new Supreme Court pick. Right. And the point, if it hadn't become clear to people already, it's going to become clear pretty quick that Kennedy was a guy that he came through on a couple of huge cases, McDonald v. Chicago and D.C. v. Heller. He came through, but he couldn't be counted on. And when Trump puts forth the new guy, we're going to literally have a diehard pro-gun 5-4 Supreme Court. Once that happens, there are going to be a ton of cases from the Ninth Circuit that the Supreme Court has heretofore refused to hear. When those types of cases start to come up, they're going to accept those cases and they're going to flip those decisions. And when they start doing that, holy cow.
Yeah, let me lend some credence to what he said there, too, with comments that Mr. Gottlieb, from the founder of the Second Amendment Foundation, mentioned on Armed American Radio the other day. And that is that he said, I don't care which justice he selects, he will be solidly pro-Second Amendment. So when Gottlieb speaks about stuff like that, you can take that to the bank. I take it to the bank, and I can tell my listeners to take it to the bank. AWR is right on the money. We're going to get a solid pro-gun justice that's going to replace a guy who came through for us, on 2 big cases, but was wishy-washy, and we might not have been able to depend on a future case. Maybe the other justices didn't take some of those bigger cases like Peruta because they knew something we didn't know. So it may have worked out in the long run for the best.
Well, and here's the deal that I think about quite often. We voted for Trump, or I won't speak for everyone, but I did, and I love Trump, and I know Mark and I talked about Trump leading up to the election, and I constantly encourage Mark. I say, look, he's going to win. He's going to win. He's going to win. But here's the deal. For all the bright hopes I had, I never dreamed that he was going to secure America for decades to come. And that's what this pick will do for the Second Amendment. We're looking at 20 to 30 years of the Second Amendment protected because of this one pick that's coming. And it's an amazing time to live in. And I mean that. I've thought about that. I say that with thought. I don't say that just on a whim. This is an amazing time to witness. And just as you asked your first guest, Kurt, this particular thing about Reagan. What's one thing you remember about Reagan? People are going to do that about Donald Trump. They're going to go 30, 40, 50 years from now, what was something he did that you remember? And that's how important this is going to be.
And I know Ginsburg would like to wait out
I was
Trump
say
administration, but she's going to have a hard time doing it when it's Trump and then Pence and then Pence. She's not going to be able to wait this out. So I think we're going to see a historic 6-3 split.
Yes, I was going to close out the piece by saying, listen, I don't think it's even remotely a stretch to see President Trump picking another Supreme Court justice before this 4-year term is over. She's 177 years old, and I mean, she falls asleep. She falls asleep when she's asleep. I mean, she's in like double deep-seated coma. You know, God bless her. This is a woman who has no legal, moral middle ground. She's made it clear she hates the president. She doesn't want the president. She didn't want him. So I don't want her ruling. I want her sitting on her ass in a rocking chair somewhere at an old folks' home, enjoying the rest of it. Guys, listen, never get enough time, but thank you. Look forward to catching up next week. AWR Hawkins, whose podcast Bullets comes out every Tuesday, and Mark Walters is on Armed American Radio Monday through Friday and Sunday evenings as well. Winners and losers, the end of the podcast. Thank you, guys. Thanks again to Craig Shirley, the author and historian, the Reagan biographer. I thought that was a fascinating conversation, and hopefully we'll have him back. As always, thanks again to AW and to Mark. Always really good, relevant conversations. And I've said it before, I do a pre-show wrap, kind of a prep show on Periscope every day, usually before from about 9 to 9:30. If you guys have any questions you want me to ask a guest, please let me know what those are, because if they're not stupid, I'll do them. I'll get them in. I'll get them into the show, and we'll talk about them. Got a little special for you guys tomorrow. Patrick K. O'Donnell, he has written The Unknowns. He has written a couple different books. He's got something coming out on the Rock of the Marne. Just a fantastic historian. We're going to talk about Independence Day, and I don't mean talk about the holiday. I want to talk about the actual day. So, again, I said earlier, July 2nd was the day. That's the day this country declared independence. July 4th, it became official. But I want to talk about the day in 1776. I want to talk about the people and the men and the women and the world at the time. And I don't think a lot of people appreciate the true scope of what these people did. You know, citizen soldiers became a thing with them, why it was and how it was, and why it should be something that as you celebrate the 4th of July and think about all of the blood shed for you and for me and for the freedom of this country and millions around the world, there's a deeper story there that maybe hopefully we can pass on to our kids and not let it die the way liberal education is trying to make a lot of America's past die. So winners and losers today. The winners are, this is Patriots. I'm going to do winners. Winners are all of you, first of all, listeners, and patriots around the world who are having your voice heard despite the social backlash and repercussions of the left and the media. And Lord knows I'm with you. Continue having our voices heard is a freedom that we enjoy here that not everybody has. Ask Tommy Robinson if you want to talk about freedom of speech. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful 4th, and we'll catch up with you guys again tomorrow.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
I think that it's the epitome of hypocrisy. Unless you fall in line with their liberal agenda, this uniparty, globalist, liberal agenda, they will never support you. They use the whole gender issue, of course, as some kind of tool to prop up their messaging, but it's the phoniest thing.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125.